Denise burst into my workshop, waving the foreclosure notice with trembling hands, her voice cracking. "Why is the bank saying we're losing the house?" I didn't even look up. "You're the owner now, remember?" Her face turned ghost white, because she finally realized what I'd done. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. I wasn't supposed to be home that day. My meeting at the hardware co-op ended early, and instead of swinging by Ray's diner like usual, I drove straight back, craving quiet. The moment I stepped through the back door, I heard voices drifting from the kitchen, laughing, careless, unguarded. I moved slow, boots silent on the tile, and that's when I heard it. Brad's smug voice cut the air like a blade. "Sheesh, can you believe he's still paying the mortgage? On a house that's practically ours now?" A beat of silence, then Denise's laugh, low, dry, too practiced. "He's too dumb to know I refinanced it in my name. The man signs papers like he signs birthday cards. Doesn't even look." They laughed again. Not a slip of immaturity or a joke taken too far. It was real. It was cruel. And it was calculated. I stood there in the hallway, gripping the edge of the old bookshelf I built with my father's tools, the same shelf that held our wedding photos, my service medals, and the deed to this house. At least it used to. My pulse thudded in my ears like war drums, not from rage, but from something colder, final. The kind of silence that comes before an avalanche. That house. They called it ours. But I built that porch with my bare hands. I rewired every socket after the fire. I poured myself into every plank and nail. It wasn't a house to me. It was a life carved out from years of backbreaking labor and quiet endurance, and I gave them access to it all. Trusted Denise when I was laid up in the hospital last year after the accident. She said she'd handle the refinancing while I recovered. "We'll consolidate the loan, save some money," she said. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've got us." I'd nodded. I wanted to believe her, but I'd signed whatever she gave me. My hands shook back then, still stiff from surgery, and she placed the pen in my fingers like a mother feeding a child. I thought that was love. Turns out, it was the noose. That night I sat in the garage, staring at the toolbox my father left me, the one with the dent in the lid from when I dropped it at 19. The metal felt cold, like the world around me. I didn't rage, didn't cry. But something in me shifted. I realized I wasn't the head of the household anymore. I was the mark, and whatever plan they were building, it had just started to collapse. It was always in the details with Denise. Her lipstick never smudged. Her emails were always double-checked. Her alibis, when questioned, lined up too neatly. But it took me years to realize that the tidy perfection wasn't just a quirk. It was camouflage. In public, she was warm, attentive, almost old-fashioned. She brought me coffee at the church bake sale and made sure my collar was straight before Sunday service. She'd laugh too hard at things she didn't understand. My jokes about carburetors or drywall, things she'd never bothered to learn. People saw her as the ideal second wife. Supportive, cheerful, reliable. I saw her as the woman who once nursed me back to health after my surgery. But now, in the silence of my study with a dull lamp flickering overhead, I saw her differently. I pulled down the fireproof box from the top shelf, where I kept the real records, the ones she never cared to ask about. I sifted through 20 years of receipts, property tax filings, maintenance records I kept with military precision, and then I reached the last envelope, the one with the new refinancing paperwork she insisted I didn't need to worry about. That's when it hit me. My name was gone. My signature was on the forms, sure, but not where it should have been. The deed had been refiled, and I wasn't listed, not as co-owner, not even as occupant. I didn't call her out, not yet. I drove to the county clerk's office, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles pale under the skin. The woman at the desk took my driver's license, tapped at her keyboard, and looked up with the soft, distant professionalism of someone who delivers bad news 100 times a day. "Sir," she said, not unkindly, "according to our records, you're not the legal owner of 41 Crestwood Drive anymore. The deed was transferred last June. Current owner of record is Denise Marsh, sole owner." Her words didn't echo. They pierced. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. What was the point? The documents were already sealed, filed, notarized. The law didn't care about betrayal. It cared about names on paper. I walked out into the sunlight with a certified copy in hand, each page feeling heavier than the last. The parking lot was quiet, a thin wind scraping across the pavement. I stood beside my truck, staring at the name typed clean across the top of the page. Her name. Not mine. Not anymore. And that's when I understood. This wasn't some misunderstanding. She hadn't stolen my house overnight. She'd been planning this for months. The shift was subtle at first. Denise stopped setting a second cup of coffee in the morning. Brad left his work boots in my spot in the garage. Cody, who used to ask me about engine work and always called me sir, had started grunting past me like I was a tenant overstaying a lease. No one said it outright, but the silence was beginning to sound like eviction. That evening, as I walked into the kitchen, Brad was leaning back in my chair, feet on the table, snacking on peanuts he hadn't paid for. Denise, glass of wine in hand, smirked like a landlord hearing the rent's late again. "We've been thinking," she began, swirling the wine like it was part of her performance. "Maybe it's time you considered something smaller, like a condo near the seniors' center." "Yeah," Brad added without looking at me, cracking a shell. "You know, a place with less responsibility." I didn't answer, didn't blink. Just watched as they slowly rebranded my home as their asset and my presence as a burden. They'd been emboldened by something, some twisted confidence that I was finished, that I wouldn't fight back. Denise had tasted power when she erased my name from the deed, and now she wanted the rest, the space, the silence, the symbolic purge of everything I'd built. They wanted the house without the man who made it a home, a clean slate, mine, without me. And yet, they underestimated something critical. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't pleading. That's what confused them. They expected rage, or maybe begging, some emotional outburst they could use against me. But I gave them nothing. Instead, I started paying attention to the rhythms, to the power dynamics, to who opened the bills, who signed for deliveries, who answered the phone when the mortgage company called. Denise played house like a queen on a chessboard, certain she had checkmate in 2 moves. But I was studying the board. I slept in the guest room now, voluntarily. Not because they pushed me there, but because I needed clarity, quiet, a place to observe without distraction. I wasn't considering leaving. I was documenting how they wanted me gone, the way vultures circle before they descend, the way a coup begins with polite suggestions and ends with a silent exile. They thought they'd already won. That was their first mistake. It wasn't revenge I was after, not in the way they'd understand it. What I wanted was precision, clean lines, no blood, no noise, just a correction, a reset. And for that, I needed someone who knew the system better than they did. I needed Frank. Frank Patterson and I served together in Iraq. He had a calm that unnerved even our CO. After the service, he went into law with the same discipline he brought to demolitions. Quiet, exact, surgical. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when I called, he didn't ask why. Just told me to come by after 6, like old times. His office was small, neat, and smelled like cedar. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. I handed over the files. mortgage statements, title history, copies of the refinanced deed. He read in silence, flipping through the paperwork with surgical fingers. Then, finally, he leaned back, a slow grin spreading beneath his salt and pepper beard. "Well, look at that," he said, tapping a line on the loan. "You're still the borrower. The house may be in her name, but the debt, it's yours. Means if the payments stop, the bank doesn't chase her. They chase you, and if you don't pay, they foreclose on her title." I didn't smile. Not yet. But something inside me exhaled for the first time in weeks. A pressure valve slowly releasing. Frank saw it too. They played games with ownership, but forgot who signed the note. That's your leverage. Over the next few days, Frank drew up a trust, one I controlled. We shifted the debt through a legal mechanism that protected me while keeping the burden where it was. Every step was by the book. No dramatics, no loopholes, just facts, just paper. Then I did something that took every ounce of discipline I had. I stopped paying. No explanations, no warnings, just silence. The weeks ticked by. I stacked the unopened bank notices in a drawer. I ignored Denise's offhand comments about timely payments and automatic drafts. She hadn't noticed yet. She thought I was still covering everything, as always, but the bank noticed. 90 days later, a white envelope from Hillstone Lending landed in the mailbox, bold red letters stamped across the front. Notice of foreclosure proceedings initiated. She opened it at the kitchen counter. I heard the tearing of the envelope from down the hall. Then, silence. No laughter. No smug voices. Just the faint sound of a plan unraveling. And I hadn't raised my voice once. The door to my workshop slammed open hard enough to rattle the tools on the pegboard. Denise stood there in her silk robe, clutching the foreclosure letter like it was a warrant for her execution. Her face, usually powdered to perfection, was pale beneath the morning light. No mascara, no lipstick, just raw panic. "Why is the bank saying we're defaulting?" she barked, voice brittle, teetering between fury and fear. I didn't stop sanding the maple plank in front of me. The grain was clean, tight, honest, unlike the woman standing in the doorway. I ran the sandpaper in slow, even strokes, letting the silence thicken between us. "You're the owner, remember?" I said without looking up. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Her breath caught like a gear slipping in an old engine. The anger drained from her eyes, replaced by something colder. Realization. "You did this on purpose," she whispered, her voice trembling now. I finally met her gaze. "No. I just stopped paying for something I don't own." That broke her composure. She lunged forward, waving the letter in my face like it could undo the past. "They're saying we have weeks before they put the house on auction. You can't just sit there. This is your mortgage." I let her shout, let her pace and plead. It was the first time in a long while that she wasn't in control, and the mask cracked fast. Her voice rose in pitch, edged with desperation. No more poise, no more smirks, just a woman watching the scaffolding of her illusion crumble. Then she tried something new. Softness. "I'll fix this," she said, stepping closer. "We'll add your name back to the deed. Just talk to the bank, explain there was a mix-up." I set the sandpaper down and wiped my hands on a rag. My eyes never left hers. "You didn't make a mix-up, Denise. You made a choice." She blinked. Once, twice. Then looked down at the floor like it might offer her a way out. "I thought it would make things easier," she muttered, the excuse already sour in the air. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because deep down she knew this wasn't a mistake that needed fixing. It was a mirror, finally turned around. And she didn't like what she saw. The sky was gray that morning, low and heavy with unshed rain, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I parked my truck under the old maple across the street, the one I'd planted back when I still believed this house would be my last. I cracked the window just enough to smell the damp earth and the first bitterness of coffee in my thermos. Steam curled up like smoke from a slow-burning fuse. At exactly 8:03 a.m., the sheriff's cruiser rolled in, black and white, indifferent and inevitable. The kind of arrival that doesn't announce justice, just conclusion. I saw Cody first. He flung open the front door, half-dressed, barefoot on cold concrete. "What the hell is this?" he barked at the uniformed deputies. Brad was close behind, shirtless, puffed up like a rooster too stupid to realize the sun had stopped rising for him. "We have rights. You can't just throw us out," he shouted, phone in hand, recording nothing that would matter. He threatened lawsuits, screamed about fraud, but his voice cracked. Too high, too thin, all posture, no power. Then came Denise. She didn't scream at first, just stood in the doorway, clutching the edge of the frame like it might keep the house from slipping away. The deputies moved with cold precision, efficient, impersonal. One handed her the papers, the other signaled to the locksmith. And then it broke. Denise's sobs came in waves, raw and theatrical, like someone auditioning for sympathy in a room full of ghosts. "You don't understand. I'm the victim here. This is my house," she wailed, mascara streaking down cheeks too used to foundation and fakery. But the bank didn't flinch. The locksmith turned the key, the lock clicked, and just like that, the house no longer belonged to anyone inside it. Their bags followed soon after. Trash bags, suitcases, boxes sloppily packed and dumped on the lawn. Years of entitlement collapsed into an untidy pile of consequences. I took a sip of coffee, still hot. It wasn't joy I felt. Joy is for weddings and grandchildren. What I felt was equilibrium, something that had been knocked out of alignment slowly clicking back into place. It wasn't vengeance, it was correction. They had rewritten the story without me, so I rewrote the ending without them. And this time, the signature at the bottom was mine. After the locks clicked shut, the unraveling was quick, but not sudden. It was the kind of slow erosion that only looks fast to those who never saw the cracks forming. Denise packed what she could into her Lexus. Wedding china, high heels, a box of photos she'd probably burn out of spite, and drove 2 towns over to her sister's house. Patty, the one who always smelled of boxed wine and wore pity like perfume. Denise hated her, but beggars can't be choosers once the spotlight goes out. Cody didn't bother saying goodbye. He drifted off into the kind of apartment complex where the buzzers don't work and the windows are always taped up from the inside. I heard he was crashing on a friend's couch for a while, then with a girl who kicked him out after 2 weeks. Job prospects didn't follow him. Neither did respect. Brad lasted a little longer, still clinging to that puffed-up ego like it was a life raft in a flood. He tried to file something in court, some bluff of a lawsuit filled with errors and printed on discount paper. It went nowhere. 2 months later, the sheriff knocked on his door this time. Unpaid loans, credit cards maxed out. He'd borrowed on a future that was never his to spend. They cuffed him in front of a laundromat. I only know that because a friend of a friend saw it, said he looked more shocked than sorry. The rumors made their way back to me, of course. He set us up. He tricked us. It was entrapment. No, it was inevitability. They never once asked how I'd gotten my hands on the original mortgage paperwork, or how I knew about the forged documents. They just assumed I'd be too slow, too trusting, too tired to do anything. They mistook silence for senility, mistook calm for weakness. They believed that age dulled the mind. What they never understood was that time sharpens it. I wasn't old. I was patient. And patience is a weapon they never saw coming. Every lie they told was another brick in the foundation of their downfall. They thought I was just an obstacle, something to work around, to phase out quietly. But I wasn't the obstacle. I was the wall. The cabin isn't much to look at. Rough-cut pine, a roof that creaks when it rains, a screen door that whistles in the wind. But it stands solid, bones, strong and square. No marble countertops, no chandelier over the dining table. Just honesty in the grain of the wood and quiet that settles deep into your ribs. It's the kind of place that doesn't pretend to be more than it is. And that's why I chose it. I put my name on the deed the same day I signed the check. No co-signers, no favors, no hidden clauses. Just ink, mine alone, and the peace that came with it. The lock on the front door clicks clean when I turn the key. It's a sound I never used to notice. Now it's music. My mornings start early now, not because I have to, but because I want to. I rise with the light and take my coffee to the back porch where the lake holds still, like glass poured by God himself. I watch the herons move like old men with secrets. I bait my hook slowly, savoring the silence between casts. No one interrupts. No voices. No footsteps I don't recognize. The quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. I keep busy, not because I'm restless, but because I can. I carve birdhouses from scrap wood. Not perfect, but sturdy. The kind that last through storms. The kind a man makes when he's no longer trying to prove anything. Every so often, I catch a flicker of the past. A flash of Brad's snort. That smug, nasal arrogance like he'd won something he didn't earn. Denise's laugh, that brittle little chime that cracked when things didn't go her way. I used to hear it in my sleep. Now it's faint, distant, like a radio playing in another room, slowly fading into static. I don't hate them. Hate takes effort. I've given them enough already. What I feel now is space, inside and out. And in that space, there's no need for revenge, no hunger for apologies that won't come. There's only the knowledge that I survived their worst and stood still when they collapsed under their own weight. They thought I was finished. But when a man loses everything and stays calm, that's when he becomes dangerous. And me? I'm not angry anymore. I'm free.